Chapter 12 of Hunting for Hidden Gold. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Cave-In. Next day, refreshed by their night's sleep, the Hardy Boys set out on a systematic search for the hidden gold. There won't be much real detective work about this case, their father told them. It will be just a plain case of plugging along and searching high and low for that gold. It is hidden somewhere or the gang wouldn't be staying around. Hunt in all the abandoned mine diggings, in any place where it might possibly be hidden. You may follow that line, or you may try to find where the outlaws are camping and possibly pick up some clues there. With this to go on, Frank and Joe Hardy left the cabin in the morning. They decided to explore some of the abandoned diggings first. "It's like hunting for a needle in a haystack," said Frank, "but we might have a bit of luck and stumble on the gold." They did not go down into the town because they knew that their presence in the camp would cause considerable talk, and, although they had little doubt but that the news of their arrival had reached the outlaws by now, they preferred to remain under cover as much as possible. Hank Shale had suggested searching the workings of an old mine just over the brow of the hill, and toward this place they went. There was a faint trail through the rocks, although it had long since been snowed over, but the boys managed to find the workings without difficulty. They felt the exhilaration of the clear, cold air and the excitement of at last being at work on the mystery of the hidden gold. The abandoned mine did not look very much like a mine. It was just a large pocket in the earth with a shaft that sank down into the darkness. The shaft was but a few yards across, and a rickety ladder led down into the hard rock. "We may as well try this one for a start," suggested Frank. "We can easily tell if anyone's been around recently." They had brought electric flashlights with them, and without further ado, Frank began to descend the ladder. Joe followed. Their descent into the abandoned mine was precarious, as at various places the rungs of the ladder were broken, but after descending about 40 feet they came to the first and only level. The mine had evidently been a failure. In the light of the flashlights, they saw that they were in a rocky cavern about 200 feet in length. Not a great deal of work had been done in the mine, and it had evidently been abandoned years before. The boys found the cavern extremely cold and damp, and they made haste to explore it. When they had almost completed the circuit of the place, hunting carefully for any sign of recent removal of rock, for any place where the stolen gold might possibly have been hidden, they were of the unanimous opinion that no one had been in the place since it was originally deserted. There was not a vestige of a hiding place. The abandoned working was but one of many in that locality, one lucky strike in the neighborhood having sent other miners into a frenzy of excavation on their respective claims. It had been worked for a short time and then left to its fate. "I don't think there's anything here," said Joe. "I'm sure of it. Oh, well, we couldn't expect to find the gold right off the bat. There are lots of other mines to search yet, and most of them plenty deeper than this. Think we should go back?" "Just a minute. There seems to be a passage here." Frank's light had revealed a narrow opening at the extreme end of the cavern. He bent down and examined it more carefully. "This seems to lead somewhere," he said. "I think I'll follow it." He crouched down and made his way on hands and knees into the passage. Joe waited until he had disappeared and then called after him, "I'll wait here. If it leads anywhere, I'll call you." Joe could hear his brother scrambling along through the little corridor in the rocks. After a while, the sounds died away. It was dark and lonely in the cavern in which he stood. He waited for Frank's summons to follow. After 5 minutes, there was still not a sound from the opening into which his brother had disappeared. Joe began to get anxious. He knelt down and flashed his light into the interior of the passage. There was no sign of Frank. "I wonder if anything has happened to him," he muttered. When another 5 minutes had passed and there was still no sign of his brother, Joe decided to invade the passage himself. Anything might have happened. Frank might have been overcome by poisonous gases in the depth of the mine. He might have tumbled down some unseen pit and hurt himself. Flashing the light ahead of him, Joe crawled into the narrow corridor in the face of the rock. For several yards the passage extended directly ahead. Then there was a turning. Examining the corridor, Joe saw that it was not a natural opening in the rock, but had been constructed by human hands, for the marks of pick and shovel were plainly visible. It had been blasted out of the rock, and for a short distance the dimensions of the passage were of good size, but gradually they narrowed. He had just gone past the turn in the tunnel when he heard a faint shout. "Joe! Joe!" It seemed to come from a long distance, and there was a note of appeal in it that told the boy his brother was in danger. Scrambling on through the tunnel that seemed to open before him in the vivid circle of light, he made his way toward Frank. He heard the cry again, and this time it was louder. He shouted back, "I'm coming! What's the matter?" "I'm trapped here! My foot is caught!" On through the gloomy tunnel Joe went. At last the light revealed the form of his brother some distance ahead. Frank was lying flat on the rocky floor of the passage, with his foot caught in a crevice between two heavy boulders. He had tried to climb over them, and one rock had evidently become dislodged, pinning his foot against the other. "Are you hurt?" asked Joe anxiously as he reached Frank's side. "No, I'm all right, but I can't move my foot." Joe put down the flashlight so that its glare clearly illuminated the scene. Then he went over to the boulder and exerted all of his strength to move it. But the boulder was heavy. Had it struck Frank's foot directly, it would have shattered it to a pulp. Fortunately, it had merely slid into position above the other rock, pressing against the boy's ankle and imprisoning his foot in the crevice between. Frank was unable to lend his brother any assistance. He was lying face downward and was unable to rise to a sitting position. "It's mighty heavy," panted Joe as he strove to move the heavy boulder. It refused to budge. "Rest a bit, and then try it again." Joe sat down, breathing heavily. "How did it happen?" he asked. "I was crawling along through the tunnel when I saw this pile of boulders ahead. At first I was going to turn back, but I thought that when I had come this far it was foolish to turn around, so I started to climb over the boulders. Just as I was almost over, that big boulder slid down against the other one, and there I was. Lucky I didn't break my leg. I'm afraid to move that boulder the wrong way, or it might roll over onto you. There's only one way to move it safely, and that is to lift it straight up, just enough to release your foot. But I'm afraid I'm not strong enough. Try it again, anyway." Again, Joe applied himself to the heavy rock. Although he strained and gasped in his efforts to move it, the boulder defied his efforts, and he was unable to budge it an inch. He made attempt after attempt, but it soon became evident that the effort was beyond his strength, and at last he was forced to sink back, exhausted, against the wall. He mopped his brow. "Too heavy," he declared, out of breath. Frank was silent. "If we only had a crowbar of some kind," he suggested at last, "it wouldn't be hard to move it then." Joe looked up. "Why, I saw a crowbar back in the mine," he exclaimed. "It will be the very thing." "Go back and get it. You'll be able to move the boulder away without any trouble. Then we'll clear out of here." Joe picked up his flashlight and turned to retrace his steps into the main working of the mine. "I'll only be a few minutes," he promised. "Don't worry about me. I won't go away," said Frank with a laugh. He could be cheerful even in the dangerous position in which he found himself. Back down the narrow tunnel crawled Joe, back toward the cavern into which they had first descended. He remembered having seen a long iron bar lying at the foot of the shaft, and he realized that it would be an ideal lever for moving away the boulder that imprisoned his brother. He made haste, not wishing to leave his brother too long imprisoned, and in a few minutes he was back in the great cave. At first he could not find the iron bar, and he hunted about, flashing the light here and there into dark corners. At last he found it, near the foot of the shaft. It was quite heavy, and one end of it lay beneath a heap of rocks. Joe tugged at the iron bar. At first it resisted his efforts. He put all his strength into the attempt, and the bar slowly moved. A final tug, and it came free so suddenly that he staggered backward. It was this circumstance that saved his life, for in extricating the bar he had dislodged the mass of rocks. With a rush and a roar they came tumbling down across the bottom of the shaft. Had Joe been standing beneath, he would have been crushed to death. Then, before the clattering had died away, came a sudden, hollow roar from higher up in the shaft. Timbers snapped and cracked. The old boards, long since rotting away, suddenly gave beneath the pressure of rocks and earth. An avalanche of stones descended into the shaft on top of the first downfall of rock. More followed. Showers of earth came rushing down, and a cloud of dust pervaded the cavern. Joe leaped back. Then, with a roar like thunder, the entire shaft caved in. Rocks and timbers came tumbling down with a terrific crash. The air was filled with the noise of smashing timbers and falling rock. The faint light from the shaft that had given some vague illumination to the cave was blotted out. The mine reverberated with echoes and shook with the force of the crash. Silence reigned. It was broken by the sharp sounds of falling pebbles that descended in the wake of the avalanche. Then those noises too died away. The cavern was filled with a choking cloud of dust. Joe was almost stupefied by horror. He realized to the full the peril of the situation. The shaft is caved in, he thought. We're trapped in the mine. We'll never get out alive. He turned his flashlight on the place where the shaft had been. The light revealed only a high sloping hill of rocks and shattered timbers. The shaft was completely blocked. It would take an army of men to clear away the debris. Joe realized that he and Frank would never be able to accomplish the task, and he knew that there was no hope of assistance from outside, for no one knew where they were. It might be days before they were traced to the mine. End of chapter 12.